Hi friends, Mindy here. I have a different sort of video for you today. I'm going to be altering this little golden book. I am going to use this to work through the devotional Silent Voices from Bythewell4god. I have been dying to do an altered book for quite a while. It's been a minute since I have done one, and so I just thought this would be a great opportunity to do that because I think it's just going to lend itself well to the sort of mixed media vibe of Silent Voices. And so the first thing that I'm doing is trying to pull apart the spine here. So little golden books are stapled on the spine. So I'm just kind of making some cuts here. I went down the center of the spine, and now I'm just going to kind of pull the binding apart, the front cover and the back cover, and just trying to preserve as much of it as I can and keep the chipboard intact. There's a good gap in between the chipboard that makes up the cover and the chipboard that kind of wraps the part around the spine. Originally, I was thinking I would be able to save that, but it didn't really work out the way that I was intending it. So what I'm going to do is just end up pulling this all apart. I want to keep the signatures intact. There are two in this little golden book. And so what I'm trying to do is kind of pull this apart here. And then I'm just going to work this back and forth and trying to loosen up those staples. They're pretty heavy duty staples in there. So just kind of loosening everything up because I want to keep the integrity of the signatures of the paper. So I'm just kind of pulling this back. You can kind of see I'll end up having to pull out some pliers, even just working these back and forth. Also, they're a little bit rusty and old, so I'm trying to be careful to not, cut myself or whatever on them. So I'm going to pull out some pliers here and just kind of continue working these staples out. Obviously, the paper is not super thick, and so I'm trying to be very cautious about, I don't want to rip, big holes in the papers of the signatures, and I don't want to, cut myself on the staples. So I'm just kind of straightening these staples out here with my pliers, and then I can get this other side. So it's basically two pieces of chipboard at the spine section that has been wrapped with that, signature little golden book foil around the outside. So I'm just pulling all of that off. I got my two signatures here, and I'm going to trim these down. You can see where I just didn't do a very good job cutting that. I'm just trimming right up next to the chipboard here. This is the part that kind of went into the actual signature. And I am going to cover this mostly. I'm going to use some of the papers from Bythewell4god that coordinated with the devotional. But first, I want to create a little spine piece. So obviously, since I'm getting rid of the spine, I now need to make another one. So I have this chipboard here. This is from the back of like a paper pad. And I'm going to cut two pieces that are about 3/4 of an inch. I think that that's going to be a good spine width for me. And I'm doubling them up so that they are about the same thickness as the chipboard of the cover, because this particular chipboard here that I'm using is not super thick. So I'm just lining this up, trying to get my little 3/4 inch spine pieces here. I have two of them. I cut them down to roughly 8 inches. These little golden books almost measure almost exactly 6 by 8. So it actually works really well with the papers from Bythewell4god. So the first thing I'm going to do is glue these two pieces together to give me the a little bit more stability and also the same thickness roughly. It just makes it pretty close. It's not exact, but it's pretty close. So just gluing that together, I just used some art glitter glue for that. It's just a nice strong adhesive. And then I covered it with scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive. And I'm going to do that with both of the covers. So obviously I'm not going to be keeping the covers the way that they are. So you could cover these in a myriad of different ways, but because that 6 by 8 paper is basically the exact right size, I am just going to do that. Now that's not going to leave me any paper to be able to wrap the cover. So I'm just going to line it up really neatly, and it'll have the little sort of exposed edge on the top and the bottom, but I'm okay with that because again, I want this to still, say that this is an altered book. So I don't want it to just, completely look like something else. So for the front and back covers, I'm just covering that with some scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive. And then now I'm pulling out these papers from By the Well, just deciding which ones I want to use for the cover. I decided to use these kind of really mixed media pieces because they're my favorite of the paper pack. I really like this whole vibe. So these are the two pieces that I'm going to use on the covers, just trying to decide which way I want them to face. In the end, I'm going to settle on this way. And so I have my double-sided adhesive on here, and I'm going to pull them back. I'm going to pull the center one down and then just kind of create little flags on the other pieces just so that I can really line this up, because again, these covers are almost the exact size. And so I really need to make sure that I am lining this up, because I'm not wrapping this to the inside. I'm not doing like I would normally do with a cover when I cover it in paper or fabric or whatever. And so I'm just literally lining it up to cover just the top of this paper, or of the cover. And it's going to be, I don't know, maybe like 1/8 of an inch off that I'll need to trim down. But for the most part, I mean, it's pretty close. And so, like I said, it will have that exposed edge of the cardboard cover or chipboard cover, and I'm totally fine with that. So you can see here, I'm just coming in with an X-Acto knife and very carefully trimming off that excess. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the back cover. So just being very careful how I kind of line it up there at the bottom. And then I will kind of press down into the exposed adhesive, and then I'll pull the rest of it off. So now I'm trying to decide how I want to cover my spine section. And so you could use paper for this as well if you wanted to, but I happen to have this fabric in my stash, and I think that this is going to look really good if I wrap it around. And so that's the look that I'm going to go for here. Kind of fiddle with this just a little bit, making sure this is exactly how I want this to be. So I had trimmed it down and I felt like it was just a little bit too wide. So I'm just going to trim this a little bit. I just cut a little slit in it and tore it. I really want that rough raw edge on there. And this is just going to wrap all the way around the spine. So I'm just trying to decide if this is exactly how I want it. And then I'll move it back and forth, everything lined up. And so I'm going to start with this section in the middle. So I'm taking the spine piece and I'm putting it roughly in the middle of this fabric. I did get it a little bit off center, but that's okay. And I'm just going to press this down really well. And then I'm going to add that same adhesive there. It's I want to say it's like 3/4 of an inch because it fit that spine piece almost perfectly. And I am going to just run this along the edge of the front and the back cover where it's going to meet. There are a lot of different ways that you can wrap a spine, especially with fabric. This is just one of the ways. I won't even say that it's necessarily the right way because I'm not using a liquid adhesive or anything for it, but I didn't want any liquid adhesive to really like seep through the fabric. So I am using that other cover there to kind of keep a gap between my cover section and my spine section. And the reason for that is I need that cover to be able to close. So whenever you do that, you can kind of see how it will give you, having that thickness of the chipboard there will allow you to be able to close the cover, and it's not going to kind of splay open. And so I will do the same thing with this other one, but I'll just kind of have to eyeball this back cover. But just again, leaving that gap, you want to leave it roughly the same thickness as the chipboard cover that you're using so that it just folds nice and neat. So again, I did that same thing where I just kind of only exposed part of the adhesive and then pulled the rest. So now I want to cover the inside of the covers, and I probably should have done this before I put on that spine piece, but you know, hindsight is 20/20. I was really doing all of this very intuitively. I just kind of sat down and decided this was what I was going to do. So I'm having to do some creative problem solving as I go here. But for the inside cover, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm covering each of the covers, the inside with the scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive, and then I'm going to use some more of the papers from Bythewell4god for the inside pieces. And I chose a cover that is sort of neutral, but also very reminiscent of the inside of the little golden book cover. You can kind of see all of those images and everything, like the neutral kind of palette on the inside. And so that's why I chose this particular paper for the inside, just to kind of give a nod to that. I had really considered not even covering the inside and just leaving it, but in the end I decided to just go ahead and add these papers. And again, it's going to be off, you know, 1/8 of an inch or whatever that I'll need to trim down which I did off camera. And obviously now I have both of my inside pieces covered. And now I'm going to continue to wrap this piece of fabric around the inside. So I'm going to pull the adhesive off of the spine piece, and I actually am going to use some, what I'm using here is Helmar 450 quick dry. You could use Fabri-Tac or whatever, but I'm just making sure to put a really, really thin coat again, because I don't want this to seep through my fabric. But since this is on the inside of my cover, I'm not as worried about it as I would have been on the outside. In the end, my adhesive, this 450 quick dry, is very, it's at the end of its life, I think. And so I did actually have to go back through and add a little bit more glue. And I actually just used my art glitter glue, and I just kind of ran it up underneath there just to make sure that everything was really nice and secure. And it did not seep through, and it did really well. So I just left that off of the camera, but you can kind of see how everything is here. I'm going to let that sit and dry while I work on the signatures. So this did have 2 signatures. You wouldn't think that a little golden book would have 2 signatures in it, but it did. So I am going to make a little template now for my spine. And so I know that my spine is roughly 3/4 of an inch by roughly 8 inches tall. So I'm just going to cut a piece of scrap paper here to those dimensions so that I can create a template to sew in my 2 signatures. Sorry for the glare on my light there. You can see I'm just going to trim this down. I actually kind of just eyeballed this and it worked out pretty well. So I just kind of got lucky there, but just testing this here in my spine. You can see just making sure that it fits in there. And then I'm going to come in with a ruler and draw my 2 lines for my signatures. And just basically I divided that 3/4 inch piece into 3 sections. And so now I'm just creating all of the little intersections that I need. So you can see where those lines intersect. That's where I'm going to be punching my holes. And I'm working on a foam mat. You could do this into like an old book or like a dictionary or something like that. You could just an old mouse pad or something like that. I've just had this little foam thing forever, so I just use that. And then I'm going to use my book cradle even for these little signatures. There's only a few pages in these signatures, but I'm using my template and folding it along the line for the first signature here and lining this up with the top and bottom of my signature, and just going to punch my little holes here. Obviously this paper is pretty thin, and so I'm trying to be careful as I'm punching. I don't want to do too big of holes, and it is going to still have the holes from the staples in it, and that will be okay. I can reinforce any of that as I'm actually working through the journal, so I'm not really worried about that. And now I've just moved to that second line, and I'm punching my corresponding holes for that. And then I'm going to do a 3-hole pamphlet stitch and sew these little signatures here into my journal. So I have some hemp cord. That's actually what I'm going to be using. That's kind of that same dusty kind of pink. So I'm starting from the middle hole and working to the outside. I'm sorry that I'm off camera here, but I have done this stitch multiple times. You can also search on YouTube for it if this isn't a very good explanation. But then I'm going up to that top hole. I'm going to go back into the signature, into the middle of the signature here. You can kind of see now I'm finally back on camera. Then into that top hole, and then I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom hole and back out to the outside of the book, and then I will come back through that middle hole into the inside. I'm actually having to use some pliers here because I'm working through those double layer of chipboard and also the adhesive. It just makes the needle kind of want to stick a little bit. So anyway, I'm just kind of pulling that back through that middle hole, and then I'm going to make sure that my end pieces are on either side of that long thread there, and then I'm going to tighten everything down, make sure everything's nice and tight, pull off my needle, and then I'm going to just tie this into a knot, and then I'll leave that hanging for now. I'm going to do the same exact thing with this second signature. So I will always prefer to work from back to front. So I started with the second signature, and now I'm going to do the first one. And now I'm going to work on the altered book part of this. So I want to make these pages just a little bit sturdier. So I'm going to glue them together. I've already kind of paper clipped them together so that I can glue them. I'm adding some art glitter glue around the edges. I'm also making sure to come in about a ½ inch along the right edge there, so that when I trim these pages down, that they are still going to stay stuck together. So this section is actually going to cover up my sewing here. So I'm just tucking those little end pieces underneath in the middle. I'm going to apply just a little dot of glue right on the knot, and then I'm going to go through and glue all of this down. This is really just so that I have a little bit more stability for these pages, so that they don't rip out and like that. They're just going to be a little bit thicker to work on this way. You would do this, excuse me. You would do this in an altered book as well, like if you were, pulling out pages and sewing them together or whatever. So you would just glue them. So I just went through and did that even on these little pages. And now I need to trim off the excess of this. So I'm just lining up my ruler. Now, really, you should be doing this with a steel edged ruler, but I can't seem to find my Tim Holtz ruler. So I'm just going to be very careful. I have my T ruler here and a craft knife, and I'm just going to very gently go through these papers here, and I'm just making several shallow passes so that I don't tear the paper, so it doesn't get caught up with the knife or whatever, and also so I don't mess up my ruler. And then I'm just cutting off all of the edges so that these will line up nicely with my covers now. So the last thing that I want to do to prepare my book for all of the devotional work that I'm going to do in here is I'm going to add some gesso over the top. And this is obviously to cover up some of the image that's back there. It's also going to add a little bit more stability to these pages as well. Give it a little bit more tooth if I want to add some ink and different things along the way. And so I'm just going to go through and add this gesso. I'm using Golden brand gesso, but you could use anything. And I'm just kind of covering up the pages. At one point, I ended up not really realizing how wet that first page was, and it kind of dried attached to my little plastic sheet, and so it actually ripped the paper. You'll see that in a second, but it's not going to be a problem when I go to actually work through this book. I will just add a piece of paper over the top, and you'll never know that I did that. And I decided to kind of keep these numbers as much as I can as well, because I'm hoping that I can get them to correspond with the day of the devotional that I'm working on. And so there are only going to be like 11 pages in here, so I'm going to have to add in some paper, and but I have some ideas for that as I'm working through the devotional, but I thought I would just keep the numbers as much as I can for now. They may get covered up. We'll just have to see how it works when I'm actually working through the devotional. But obviously these ones that are very brightly colored, I'm adding a little more gesso to really kind of push all of that back, and I may add another layer in the future as well, but this is just kind of getting everything started so that I have a good kind of head start when I actually start working through all of the days of the devotional. So I'm just going to go through. I'm not going to make you watch me paint all of these pages, but I just kind of wanted to show you. I'm putting some deli paper in between the two layers as well as I'm working. In the end, you can see this is where I started kind of peeling them up and realized that that cover page, that first page, was absolutely stuck to my plastic sheet there. You can see kind of a mess. But again, I will just add one of the papers from the Bythewell4god kit, and it will be fine. So it's a good thing that there was actually two thicknesses of paper there. Otherwise, I would have had a big gaping hole on that first page. So this is what it looks like after everything has been painted and dried. And this is going to be my setup for Silent Voices from Bythewell4god. So if you like this video, I would appreciate it if you gave it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I believe there are still some of these kits available in the shop. I'll put my affiliate link down below, as well as a link to my Facebook group. I'd love it if you would join that. And until next time, bye.